button on the top.
Oh, now it's red.
Now it's red.
Let's start again.
Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Savage Project. I'm Will.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Norm.
Good evening and good night. Just before we start, we're using a new camera today. This is the Zoom Q8, which is their podcaster's camera. They sent it to us to test out. We have it before anybody else in the world.
Nice.
As far as I know.
Yep.
It has two XLRs. We're going to do a whole video on the site, and there'll be a post already on the site by the time you read this about our kind of early impressions with it.
Yeah.
But we didn't turn it on.
Norm screwed up.
Norm screwed up. Yeah, it was Norm's fault. That Norm right there.
He doesn't, it's not his camera. He didn't know.
Usually when we screw up, it's my fault. So it's a refreshing change.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I deny.
It's never Will's fault.
Anyway, we talked about feedback from the driving episode.
But we weren't recording, so.
Well, we have audio.
We have audio.
We don't have video.
So stay tuned after.
After we talk about what we're going to talk about.
Right.
Then there'll be an audio only bit with all of our feedback on the car episode, some more tips, your report from Driving with Thing 2, all that stuff.
Yeah. So
and now,
going
a
clear.
podcast. Do you have a segue for this, Norm?
There was nothing to segue from.
Speaking of horrible mistakes.
Speaking of horrible mistakes, did anybody watch the Scientology documentary?
Which is not a mistake.
No, it's not a mistake at all.
Maybe joining Scientology for 35 years.
That's what I was thinking.
Most of what I know about Scientology I learned from South Park.
Or Simpsons.
The South Park one, like, this is what Scientologists actually believe. That has stuck with me for a long time.
Yes, and it's all accurate and was vetted by the lawyers at South Park.
Right.
Carefully
Viacom.
vetted. And to finish this, when the writer of the book Going Clear, whose name escapes me at this very second, wrote his initial article for the New Yorker, it was the most fact-checked article in New Yorker history.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
And apparently HBO had, by the press accounts, 160 lawyers go over every second of Going Clear, the HBO doc that aired Sunday night?
Yeah, Sunday night.
Yeah, a week ago.
We're talking about an organization that beat the IRS.
Right.
You need the lawyers.
Right. You just to be clear, we should talk about, normally this is a delicate subject because I don't want to get sued. What's the premise of the doc? The doc is based on a book by a guy who was a Scientologist for 30 years.
No, he wasn't a Scientologist for 30 years.
The book.
I'm sorry, I tell a lie. Forgive me. The article in the New Yorker was written by Paul Haggis.
Right.
Who is a filmmaker. He directed Crash and has written many great films. And Paul Haggis was a Scientologist for almost 3 decades and got out and wrote about it in the New Yorker. And he's probably the central subject of Going Clear, the HBO doc. Which is a terrific and chilling and intense documentary about revealing for the first time to many people, they actually don't spend a lot of time talking about the church doctrine about Xenu and Thetans. Those are asides in the film. What they really talk about is some of the abuses that longtime members of the church endure willingly while inside the church.
For example?
So the documentary it's a 2-hour documentary, and it's the format is that it interviews people like Paul Haggis, former members of Scientology, some of which were in the higher echelon of lieutenants who worked under the current chairman
spokespeople
and the lead head PR people. And so these people have seen it all and have been there for decades. And the format, the structure of the documentary is really fascinating because it starts off relatively innocuous, and which is the progression of the indoctrination.
Right.
So it starts off with Paul. I mean, he is a central figure. How did he get indoctrinated? And really, if you watch just the first half hour, it seems fairly harmless as an organization.
And to be clear, the Church of Scientology maintains that all of the former Scientologists interviewed in the film are liars. And that they're not telling the truth about what happened to them within the Church of Scientology.
Which... Okay.
That is a disclaimer that's been in everything I've ever read about Scientology, so I'm putting it in our podcast.
Okay, thanks, Adam.
And we're relaying.
Our legal team thanks you in advance.
Hey, anytime.
We're only relaying, to the best of our recollection, what these people have said in the documentary and in articles.
Hearsay.
We're
great.
But
I'm going to run this by our lawyers, and we'll see if we can get 160
Turns out
people
they
on
ate
it.
dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So we've all heard about and maybe in your town you might have a institute, a local Scientology branch, or seen them in the subway. But it talks about what the e-meters do, and its branch of
What do the e-meters do, Norm?
it's like therapy. It's like
they measure galvanic skin reactance.
Yes.
It's as they say in the film, it's 1/3 of a lie detector. So if you're experiencing high stress, your galvanic skin reactance goes up, lower. It's like a biofeedback
Because your skin gets
machine.
clammy, etc.
You ever played with a biofeedback
Yeah.
machine? Same thing.
Okay.
And the central idea behind Scientology's use of e-meters and a process called auditing is that the person to be audited puts their hands on a pair of cans that are attached to essentially a galvanic skin reactance detector. And they reiterate things that were traumatic to them, memories that they had. And if they have emotional spikes, that shows on the e-meter, and they keep on going over them until those emotional spikes are lowered.
So
it sounds like a form of therapy.
It's actually similar to psychotherapy.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like
a Scientologist would go crazy when you say that because they hate therapy, they hate psychotherapy, they think of it as anathema to Scientology. The thing that most chilled me about the documentary was footage of LRH, of L. Ron Hubbard. That guy's mouth. Do you remember the third Lord of the Rings movie when the henchman from Mordor comes out to speak to Aragorn
at the Black Gates?
Yes, at the Black
And
Gate.
it's just a lower mouth.
Terrifying.
Oh
mouth.
yeah.
That's what L. Ron Hubbard's mouth reminded me of.
Oh, that's
well.
not
There's
good.
some really up close shots, and he does have a very confident look. Now, did we do a spoiler cast about The Master?
No.
We did not, but I saw it and I loved it.
And it's these. I mean, the HBO documentary and The Master are almost a pair of.
It's worth watching both of them.
Okay.
Viewings.
Philip Seymour, The Master. Lots of people. The Master was a very polarizing film.
It was Amy Adams and Philip Seymour
Amy
Hoffman,
Adams, Philip
right?
Seymour Hoffman, Joaquin Phoenix. It's a very polarizing movie. There are people that absolutely hated it. I personally thought that it was a masterpiece from so many perspectives. I felt like Joaquin Phoenix's performance was on a level of watching Brando in Streetcar, like that level of
Just seething.
an actor's face could hold the screen for minutes at a time, showing this whole wealth of emotion.
To hold his own against a film where Seymour Hoffman shot 65 millimeters, where you get full face taking up a giant screen.
For minutes at a time. Plus, from a camera work perspective, this film, Anderson takes on, I don't even know what his inspiration, because I can't think of another film that does this. There'll be entire scenes where the camera is, let's say, sitting at the table in a boardroom, just looking across the table. And two people will come into the room and sit down, and you might not even see one of them fully, and the other one you might not see at all, and they'll have a conversation, and the camera will not move for the entire film, for the entire scene.
Did you watch a lot of Kevin Smith movies?
And yet you are riveted the entire time. Like, just the way he sits that camera, it's almost like the way Herzog does documentaries, right? Like Herzog, as a documentarian, will park the camera until something happens and make you wait as he waited for it to happen.
Right.
A mountaineer bursting into tears about his dead brother, or a Sandinistan child soldier talking about a TV show. Like these things will capture you, and The Master is incredible on that.
I think one of the best things that P.T. Anderson does is show the charisma of and while it's not supposed to be a direct analog to Scientology, you can feel that the overwhelming presence of Philip Seymour Hoffman, and that's the kind of thing that we got across I felt at least in the HBO documentary. Of whenever L. Ron Hubbard is on camera, he has that very confident presence where he knows exactly what he believes, and his ability to capture hundreds of thousands of people to follow in his teachings and his beliefs.
And it is so. Let's also to talk about a central point in the book going clear. There's a lot of good stuff in that material. It wouldn't be so saturated with it. It wouldn't have gone so far. The book wouldn't be Dianetics wouldn't be such a bestseller if there wasn't actually some useful material within this stuff. Like, there are tenets that you could call to meditation and Buddhism, to mindfulness. There are tenets you could refer to therapy, analysis, group therapy. All of these things, they have corollaries within Scientology.
There's something powerful there.
There's something powerful there, and you'd be mistaken to just say, what an idiot and what a bunch of idiots. Like, that's not how this works. And it's not like they're all charlatans either necessarily. You know, cults are full of people who are actually well-meaning and really believe in the material. It's just when they get together, they form something that wants to eat more people and has perhaps different goals than the individuals within that.
The hive mind and the feeling of loss of individuality. The most striking thing is, as someone who's not a part of that group, it's tough to imagine yourself, because you're an outsider. How can you stay decades and not know about these things and even suffer the abuses that, like you asked about, like willingly,
right?
And then
like
go
physical
on camera.
abuses or mental abuses?
Physical abuses, like beating.
Both.
Really?
I mean, they describe. So there's a point where apparently David Miscavige took a whole bunch of the senior management of Scientology and relegated them to a pair of double-wide trailers at one of their compounds that they called the Hole, and they were there for
years. Some of them for the years,
like 20,
like in solitary type confinement.
essentially
Eating
living in
guards.
bunk situations, eating gruel, doing games. Like Miscavige would show up and they would play musical chairs for hours to the song Bohemian Rhapsody until only one person, and these people are scratching and biting and fighting for the last chair until only one person is sitting, and they'll be told only that person stays in the organization. And after hours of this brutal, like, death game, he says, you all are staying, and goes away.
And why would you endure that?
And this would go on for days and days and months and
But
months.
how could you think that something like that's constructive?
Because
I mean, it's because you're in the fold, right?
and
At that
that's
point,
the thing.
You're
At
in
that
the
point,
fold.
and these people, you know, there's one woman who had been part of the Sea organization for decades, and she talks about when you're.
What's
when
the
you've
Sea
been there,
organization?
It's
Sea Org is the senior, is the, what do you call it?
It's the branch of Scientology originally started as their missionary system
Right.
on the boats.
Okay.
And you join them, you commit to $1 billion year.
You sign a $1 billion contract.
to be, and it's the only way you can get up to the top echelons.
Okay.
But this woman talked about when you're there, because you are so pot committed in your life, financially and mentally, you can't. Your brain doesn't want to start anew.
Well, so it's like your cognitive science thing. Your
Cognitive dissonance. Your belief is so strong, and that you would feel like you'd be throwing your entire life away.
You know, I think that when it comes to discussions about cults, and also, you know, some of the more severely negative aspects of religion, I want to make it clear I'm not lumping all religion in with that, because I don't believe it should be. I had some exposure to a couple of cults way back in my late teens and early 20s. I had somebody I cared about very much join one, and I actually talked to a deprogrammer back at that point and did a tremendous amount of research into it. And the thing I want to say is I think that Going Clear elicits a very reasonable cultural discussion about the danger of hive mind and cults, especially when they're under the control of megalomaniacal crazy people.
but just to be clear, usually megalomaniacal crazy people are the ones that can create this
This
kind
is
of hive
true.
mind and cult.
This is true.
Like those two things go together.
Is that it would be a mistake to believe that it's easy to dismiss, that it is until you have, and I'm not saying until you've spent time among the people who are real believers and see how sincere they are in that belief, it would be a mistake to dismiss them as idiots. Because as humans, we all crave people that agree with us to surround us. We all crave an environment of support and connection and community. That is a really deep evolutionary need, and that is what these places offer to the people that they bring in. So they say, even though you're enduring this here, outside it's worse.
Yeah.
And you believe that.
And by doing this, your connection with us is going to be stronger.
Right. And so if you think that that's not seductive, then you haven't gone deep enough in your research to understand how seductive that can really be, and how sincerely well-meaning people can join an organization like that. Every time discussion of cults comes up, I always feel the need to express that so that people really understand it would be glossing over a very important human trait to just go, those people are idiots. I'm not, because I don't do that kind of thing.
And it's not even like people are preying on people, with depression or anxiety or whatever. It's literally
that happens.
It happens
but,
right. I mean, that might make it easier for you to make that jump.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's
not a prerequisite.
Everybody wants to belong.
Yeah.
And it speaks to, the human condition.
It does.
So this is Going Deep.
It is.
It's on HBO now. You can watch
Going Clear.
Going Clear.
Going
Sorry.
Clear, which
Going
is,
Deep is something different.
It's shocking. And by the way, if have you read the book?
I haven't read the book.
So this material they go over in the movie is, I think, very carefully culled from the book. I actually thought that the documentary was, having read the book, I read the book when it first came out, it was almost a little less shocking than the book. I found the most surprising thing is to see L. Ron Hubbard in person. And if I was cutting that documentary, I might have cut it in reverse. I might have started with the horror stories and gone back to the origin story to see L. Ron Hubbard towards the end, because I feel like that would have more of a punch and a power and a terror to it. But that's all a long way of me saying, read the book. The book is phenomenal.
Why is it so fascinating? Why is Scientology so fascinating? Is it because it's a success and it's a large scale?
I think it's a success that a lot of people don't. I mean, especially in today, you hear about celebrity. I mean, because they use celebrity as a way for recruitment. And we give power to celebrity, and there's a lot of unknowns and power structures, and it is while it's technically a religion, there's a lot of semantics that we don't understand. Like, why is it a religion? And
it develops its own language so that it keeps people in and doesn't in-group out.
Well, it has its own jargon, like any religion or cult. But I think one of the primary reasons we find it fascinating is. Again, the cognitive dissonance, the idea that, like, oh my God, these terrible things are going on and they believe this crazy stuff. I mean, it seems like so far out of left field. It's like you're reading about people who wear pom-poms on their noses and are naked except for maple syrup 23 hours a day.
But I mean,
it's like such total craziness that it seems like, how does this happen?
Just to be clear, though, the basic precept,
Scientologists do that.
The maple syrup thing. Yeah. The basic precept that there's aliens from outer space that came here and did this stuff is fundamentally, I'm going to really offend people here, and I apologize in advance, but like there are parallels in every mainstream religion, right? Like there's nothing fundamentally different between the concept that, there was a guy that was dead and then his body disappeared, so he came back to life, maybe, but we don't know. Like all of this stuff, there's all stuff that's unbelievable in most of the religions I'm familiar with.
And the outlandishness of the OT level beliefs of the Xenu stuff, I think that is not the focus of this story, and that's not the stuff that's.
Well, that was the focus of South Park,
right? And that's not, and that's where this documentary ends. That's the South Park stuff. South Park is very pop interpretation.
Going Clear centers on the social aspect,
on the human,
aspect.
All that stuff aside,
right? It's
still a horrifying way they conduct the organization.
It's very chilling,
and we can be dismissive of their core beliefs of that stuff, but it's all about what's actually happening in practice.
The way they retain members and the reason that nobody talks,
the community that they build, and the strength of that community and its hold on the people within it, and that's what the documentary is about. And in that regard, I think it humanizes the face of Scientology and makes it clearer to outsiders, I think. Both the lure and what's so terrifying about it.
Now, I will have one criticism that someone on Twitter actually shared. Also, at the end of the documentary, the interviewers ask these ex-Scientologists, what do you have any regrets about the horrible things you do? And they all, of course, do.
Yeah.
But none of them go into specifics. Like, they never own up on camera, I did X, Y, Z, specific horrible things.
They probably block that stuff out.
Well, it could also be legal exposure.
Yes. And then they all talk about, them, the horrible things other people have done, but these were also the top members.
Look, I think with 160 lawyers, they crawled over every single potentially actionable phrase and edited it out or phrased it in such a way as to be, this happened to me, not this happened to someone else while I was. I mean, I really think that they were. I can only imagine how carefully they vetted every single bit of that.
Two asides that are maybe relevant to us. One, there's an acronym, the RPF, mixed appearance.
I know.
And I watched them like, oh no, it changes my.
The RPF is the name of an organization within Scientology, and
that's like it's like the top floor of like their rehabilitation for for people who've committed errors.
Oh, it's like the Ned Flanders re-education camp.
Yes.
To a certain, yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
It's called the RPF, which is, I was like, stop saying RPF. And I had the same response in the book.
And then
It's the replica prop form, and we're really nice.
I mean, it's very inclusive.
and to,
Yes, very inclusive.
I took particular note of the quadcopter shots he used
Yes.
throughout the documentary.
Oh, of the
They shoot the
facilities.
Celebrity Center in Los Angeles, multiple angles at multiple points. As soon as I saw the first shot, I said to Julia, drone shot.
I know you could tell like the wiggling
can
of
tell.
the quads, like they don't stabilize. Like,
But you could
that
also
could've been
tell
done
because
better.
it was flying so close to a tree.
Yeah.
It was like, here's a tree. I'm like, no helicopter does that.
So I thought you would appreciate those two things, at least for test listeners.
Yes,
There we go.
Lots of good drone shots.
Good job tying it all into the topic. Anything else?
Go see it.
Okay.
Go see it. Get shocked, but by all means read the book, because the book is even more detailed, even more chilling, even more intense. And I think people should know that this place effectively, the Church of Scientology effectively blackmailed the IRS into declaring them a church.
How did they blackmail the IRS?
They had 2,400 lawsuits against the IRS, against both the IRS and individual officers within the IRS, to the point where the IRS was spending a not insignificant amount of its annual budget fighting these lawsuits.
Oh, so they did the Neil Stephenson thing where they had like, essentially programmatically generated lawsuits and just sued them into submission.
Individuals actually,
And part of the agreement in them becoming a church was they would release all those lawsuits instantaneously, and they did.
And
Wow.
then Scientology was absolved of $1 billion.
They also did.
Well, I mean,
they also didn't talk about Operation Snow White, in which the Church of Scientology had hundreds of their own people within
Is this
all these.
as alleged by the book?
This is as alleged by the book.
Okay.
They had thank you, all of these agents of theirs in positions in the United States government, getting them information about the government's case against Scientology from the. Oh yeah, it's freaky, man.
Well, there's
It's very like black.
As Hunter S. Thompson says, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get
there's
you.
hope. There's still hope. It ends on a hopeful note. The numbers are diminishing. The active Scientologist numbers diminishing. Several, despite celebrities, some celebrities being held to it and holding on to it, there are high profile people that are speaking out now.
Is the precept of the documentary that Scientology is a threat?
No,
No,
I don't.
Okay.
I don't think so.
it has been a threat and it has harmed people.
Yeah.
They talk about that.
But not a threat to say.
No,
like,
that we
when you
have-
start talking about Operation Snow White,
Yeah.
I think,
No,
that's a threat to American sovereignty.
Yeah,
If the Russians were doing that, we would probably be at war right now.
it's true.
Yeah.
I had a point and I forgot it.
Sorry.
Hold on. We wanted to talk about the documentary about Scientology. Here's the thing about cults. I think a super important marker to me that a place is not on the up and up and doesn't necessarily care as much about your well-being as they claim is when they ask for lots of money. Actually, when they ask for any money.
Churches do that too.
Churches ask to do that too, and they drive hard, but it's not a requirement to go to church.
That's true.
It's not a requirement to go sit in Sunday service by any means. And there are hundreds of millions of people that receive huge benefits personally and in their community for doing that. And that is a real positive plus. Okay. I totally agree with that. There are meditators who go seek a Buddhist meditation teacher, and they may find one in a foreign country. Those teachers don't ask for money. They may ask for donations to keep the center going, but they don't ask for money. When you get to a place like Scientology, where it costs to get to the higher levels hundreds of thousands of dollars, then I think it's time to get a little suspicious. And there's no greater money racket than being a church, because all your property, all the book sales are tax-free.
Right.
And also paying their laborers 40 cents an hour, $50 a week.
Totally legal. Well, who's going to complain? Because if you complain, you're out, right?
Right.
You don't want to be
apostate.
disconnected.
Yeah.
A lot of acronyms.
Yes.
My
you
goal-
don't want to become an SP.
SP. I'm like, yes.
What's an
proud SP.
Suppressive person.
Oh. On that note, we'll be out here with the
kind of a dark
SPs.
episode of Still
Hey,
Untitled.
you want to talk about something dark? We'll talk about Last Man on Earth next time.
Is it really dark? I haven't watched it.
Oh, We'll talk about it at the start of the next episode.
Okay.
If you like us, rate us on iTunes. That is the best thing you can do to help spread the word about the podcast. We always welcome your feedback on Facebook and YouTube and all the places. The comment section on Tested.
Yes.
And we will be back next Tuesday with another edition of Still Untitled. See you guys later.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Savage Project. I'm Will.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Norm.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
And good night. And see you tomorrow.
Nice.
We had unbelievable feedback from the driving episode.
I couldn't believe all the comments. That was awesome. I was like, did we do a giveaway?
People shared their terrifying stories of learning to drive, their tips. One tip that I saw nobody mention that I completely forgot about is that parallel parking. Everybody freaks out about parallel parking. It's not hard.
No, you just got to follow the rules.
Just follow the instructions. It works every time.
Even a robot car can do it.
Actually, that's not true.
That's not true.
What?
I
thought there are robot cars that can do that.
We ground the i3 into the curb.
No!
It ground itself into the curb, technically.
We clicked a thing that said we were responsible for the car's actions, yada yada. I'm sure a lot of lawyers vetted that, and it made a really bad noise as the noise that like a 3D printer or a printer makes when the carriage tries to keep going past the end. Yeah, cars make that too. It turns out it's bad. They didn't notice that we fucked up the rims when we took the car back.
But as a human driver,
yes,
it's as long as the space is big enough, parallel parking is never impossible.
The way I was taught was axle to axle.
I was taught mirror to mirror, but same thing.
Okay, mirror to mirror.
Yeah.
Turn your wheel all the way to the right and start to go.
Assuming you're going to the right-hand space.
Yeah, in your right-hand space. And the moment your front axle is parallel with their rear axle, start turning the wheel all the way to the other side, and it works every single time.
Literally every time.
Knowing how much hood space you have in your car, you know, that's the most important thing.
Yes.
Some cars have really long hoods.
My
some don't.
Fiat is about this big.
Yeah, so you can do much tighter turns.
If you're driving a 1974 Lincoln Continental, you have a larger hood to do.
But I loved all the comments about learning to drive in other countries, learning to. I mean, fantastic.
The takeaway from that is that getting your driver's license, even in California and New York, which are the hard states in the United States, much easier than getting your driver's license anywhere in Europe. It seems like. Yeah, that's what I
didn't have that takeaway, but I see what you're saying.
People were talking about like Finland and having to like. My favorite story actually was the Norwegians or the Finns or the Swedish. Someone in Scandinavia was like, look, one of the things that we have to do, they take us out on an enormous parking lot size skid pad,
right,
and teach you how to oversteer and understeer.
Wow. I wish they did that here.
I would love to do that.
I've done that.
I would pay money to do that
on the show. It's so much fun.
Right. I mean, my father, when I was 15 or 16, took me out when it snowed and we went to the bowling alley parking lot where it was icy.
I learned how to steer into the skid.
Yeah. And that has served me well many times over the last 30 years, 20 years.
It's so funny on this on Tested what resonates deeply. Like I've never right about my expectations, and I'm always surprised, and it's awesome.
Yeah, we love seeing that kind of feedback. So
as we talked about, driving, it's one of those things you get ingrained. You're all the trauma, everything. It's stuck. It's wired.
So thing two is coming to work. He's the one I was showing how to use the stick. Had we done that by the time we talked?
Like you were going out to teach him that afternoon.
So
how did it go?
It went pretty well.
You didn't crash into anything?
Didn't crash into anything. We found a nice unused stretch of road under the freeway near Dog Patch.
Okay.
And we drove back and forth on these 2 long blocks for about an hour. He got into third gear, but I was running him really, really slowly. Like, basically, okay, get the car still, get it in neutral. Now put on the clutch, put it in first, give it a little gas, like 1,500, 2,000, and then slow. We spent half an hour just of him raising the clutch into it and feeling it drag the car forward.
This is like Karate Kid, where he's waxing the car.
I mean, I also know that he'll pick this up very quickly.
Yeah.
But it's very sweet to see him so terrified to be in control of this giant machine.
And it's not even that big. This is an Abarth. This is a tiny little car.
Yeah, but it does have some power.
Oh, yeah.
I think in modern cars, you can no longer grind the gears. I think they're too smart for that.
Really?
The moment you get into a wrong arrangement, the car just shuts down.
Oh, it stalls.
Yeah, boom, it just stops.
Oh.
And it doesn't even stop in a way that sounds like someone threw a wrench into Metropolis. It stops and just goes tunk.
I double clutched for the first year I drove a stick because I was used to driving tractors and thought that was what you had to do. Oops.
He was asking me about double clutching, and I'm like, it's a race car thing. You don't really need to do it.
It's like heel toe braking. You're probably okay for at least 10 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he did well. That's good. He's coming to work with me for the next 3 days. We're going to be shooting outside of San Francisco, and we might get some lunchtime drive training in during that.
Like the big takeaway that a lot of people had is that if you grew up driving in a rural or even like suburban area, I can't imagine learning to drive in a city with traffic at the depth and complexity that we have here.
Can you imagine?
Because this is like, I'm scared when my parents come to town and want to drive, right? And
Are we all scared of our parents driving?
I wasn't for the first 30 years, but the last 10 have been pretty terrifying. But I mean, they're fine in quiet areas. It's just here it gets kind of busy. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to one.
Do you have a segue, Norm?
No.
Oh.
I'm worried because we're using a new camera. I'm not sure we're actually recording.
It's not actually recording.
It's not?
I don't know. I'll go look.
Let's double check.
New camera.
It's green.
I don't know what that means.
You didn't press the record button.
And not my camera.
All you have to do is press the red button on the top.
Oh, now it's red.
Now it's red.
Let's start again.
That's why I checked not my camera.
You know what? Here's what we're going to do. I'll do an intro.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, hey, stay tuned after the end of the show, and we have feedback on the driving episode.
That's great.
Awesome.
Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Savage Project. I'm Will.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Norm.
Good evening and good night.